Hello, I'm Ben and welcome to Start to Finish TV. Today we're going to be talking about the exposure triangle. So first things first, let's talk about all the elements individually. The first and most important element is shutter speed, and that is exactly what it says on the tin. The speed of the shutter. In video, this is measured in fractions of seconds. So if you're shooting video and you have no other stylistic purpose to, you should want to keep your shutter speed at double your frame rate. So I'm currently shooting at 25 frames per second and my shutter speed is at 1/50th. This gives you a natural motion blur. This rule can be broken for stylistic purposes. So if you want to use a higher shutter speed, for example 1/500th of a second, it will reduce the amount of light being let into the sensor. It will also give a sharp, high intensity look. A good example of this is the opening scene from Saving Private Ryan, which is a Steven Spielberg film. To contrast this, if you were to use a slower shutter speed, for example 1/25th of a second, the sensor would be exposed for longer, resulting in more light in the image. This will increase the amount of motion blur, and that will give it a dreamy, drunk feel. The second element of the exposure triangle is aperture. This is the opening of the blade inside the lens itself. This is measured in f numbers. The lower the f number, closer to 1, will result in more light being able to hit the sensor, creating a brighter image. Another effect is that you will introduce bokeh. This is background blur to you and me. It also makes the depth of field more shallower. If I had a shallower depth of field, that would mean I would be able to focus on my eyes, but my nose would be blurry. The higher the f number, for example f22, you will be letting less light into the camera, so the image will be darker. This also will make the depth of field deeper, so I could focus on my eyes, but something in the background could also be in focus. This can be used for stylistic effect, because the shallower the depth of field, the more dreamy it will feel. And the deeper the depth of field, the more realistic it will look. The final element is ISO. This is how sensitive the sensor is to light. Most cameras start at 100 ISO and it goes up in doubles. ISO 100, ISO 200, ISO 400, ISO 800, so on and so forth. Now every time the ISO doubles, so does the actual sensitivity of the sensor. So if you have an ISO of 200, the sensor is double as sensitive as it would be to ISO 100. And then ISO 400 means the sensor is doubly as sensitive as it was to ISO 200. Now there is a trade-off. The higher the ISO, the more digital noise will be introduced. Now digital noise is not seen as professional. Now most professionals would use external light sources, so that would result in them being able to lower their ISO. A good thing to think about when you're changing your ISO is ISO, keep it low. Okay, so now we know all the elements, let's combine them. So if I was shooting a shot like this, I'd probably add a light, but we're not going to focus on the light in this video. So because there is no stylistic reason to change it, I'm going to keep my shutter speed at 1/50th of a second, as that is double my frame rate. I also feel that having my aperture as wide open as I possibly can have it, resulting in a shallower depth of field, would look better for a situation like this. So I'm going to keep my aperture as wide open as it will go. This lens that I am using to demonstrate is an f2.8 lens. Now the lens you may be using may have a different maximum aperture. And now I will adjust my ISO according to the situation that we're in, remembering to try and keep it as low as possible. Just to know that what you are shooting will change the settings that you use. And when you're changing something, just remember to think about what you are changing why you're changing it, what effect will it have, and does the effect match what you are shooting? Okay, so to quickly recap, shutter speed is the speed of the shutter. When recording video, you should try and keep your shutter speed at double your frame rate. The faster you have your shutter speed, the more intense and the less motion blur the shot will have. To contrast that, if you use a slower shutter speed, you will have more motion blur and it will look dreamy and not real. Aperture is the opening of the blades within the lens itself. The wider open the lens is, the brighter the image will be, and the depth of field will be shallower. The more closed down the lens is, the less light will be in, resulting in a darker image, as well as a deeper depth of field. ISO is a measurement of the sensor's sensitivity to light. The higher the ISO, the more digital noise will be introduced. So you should try and keep your ISO as low as possible. Remembering the saying, ISO, keep it low. The exposure triangle itself is a rule that states if you choose that you want to use, say, a specific shutter speed, then you will have to change your ISO and your aperture accordingly to make sure you get the correct exposure. Okay, so that was the exposure triangle. Hopefully you learned something new. If you did, be sure to leave a like on the video to tell me that you learned something. If you want to learn anything else, be sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell to be notified every time we publish a new video. So yeah, I'm Ben with Start to Finish TV, and I will see you in the next video.